The twin suns of Valtru burned fiercely above a cracked ochre landscape, casting distorted shadows across the endless desert. A low hum rippled through the air as the class of alien students materialized on the sand in staggered flashes of light. Their forms were varied, sleek, spined, feathered, scaled, but all bore the same insignia etched into their armor, the sigil of the Zither Institute of Intergalactic Mastery. Professor Zither himself arrived last, not with a flare of light, but a whisper displaced air, his tall, robed form appearing without spectacle. He was old even by his species standards, his skin a pale lavender, etched deep with lines of thought and time. In one hand he carried a thick, leather-bound journal, in the other a metallic stylus that pulsed faintly with thought energy. He surveyed the assembled students with narrow, gleaming eyes that missed nothing. "This," he began, his voice smooth as polished glass, "is your final examination. Theoretical brilliance means nothing in the chaos of natural force. Survive the meteor storm. Adapt, record your findings. And above all, observe the human." The students shifted uncomfortably. The storm was legend, a controlled celestial bombardment, created once every cycle to simulate planetary catastrophe. But the human? That was unexpected. "One of them lives here," Zither continued, "a willing participant, though he may not see it that way. You will not harm him. You will learn." He turned his back without waiting for questions. The air shimmered again, and he was gone. Among the students, Zil, slender, bioluminescent, with sharp, insectoid features, exchanged a glance with Kryn, a hulking biped of metal and muscle. Zil's voice buzzed telepathically into Kryn's mind. "A primitive? What can we learn from that?" "Professor Zither sees something," Kryn replied, though he didn't sound convinced. They scattered in small groups, their assignment parameters clear. Locate the human, survive the next 36 hours of bombardment, and submit full recordings of their behavioral findings. What they hadn't been told was how barren the terrain truly was, or how rapidly the heat would become unbearable. Within an hour, Zil's team, Zil, Kryn, and 2 others, was down to half their water reserves. Then they found him. The morning light did little to soften the brutality of the landscape. Charred craters marred the horizon, and blackened shards of celestial rock steamed in the shifting sands. Elias stood at the edge of the bunker, surveying the aftermath with eyes that had seen too much for one lifetime. He didn't speak. The silence was strategy, not hesitation. Behind him, Zil emerged cautiously, his luminous joints pulsing in dim rhythm. Kryn followed, dragging a makeshift tool fashioned from twisted rebar. The 4th member of their group, Virex, thin, limber, and perpetually scanning, moved with an anxious energy, as though every shadow might hold danger. The first wave had been the warning. Elias knew that. What came next wouldn't just be fire and impact. It would be chaos, pressure waves, toxic wind, debris with enough kinetic force to flay skin from bone. If they didn't finish the reinforcements by dusk, they'd be corpses in a crater by dawn. "We double the depth," Elias said finally, motioning to the pit. "Reinforce the internal braces with meteor alloy. Virex, you're on ventilation. Zil, you're helping me dig. Kryn, you're in charge of the supports. We don't have hours, we have maybe 3. Virex blinked. "How do you know that?" Elias didn't answer. He simply tapped a small device clipped to his belt, a passive gravimetric monitor, jury-rigged from broken parts. "Because the ground's already shifting. The big ones are coming." No one questioned him further. Authority in Elias came not from command, but from clarity. He didn't ask for trust. He earned it. Zil dropped into the pit beside him. The 2 worked in silence, passing chunks of stone, clearing debris. Zil's thin fingers moved with increasing efficiency. He'd never used his hands like this before. Back home, everything was automation and thought-based manipulation. But here, every motion was real, hard-earned, raw. "Why did you stay?" Zil asked, pausing. "You could have escaped after the last storm." Elias didn't stop digging. "Because running doesn't teach you anything. But it might have saved you." He looked up, sweat dripping from his brow. "Survival without understanding isn't living. It's just postponing death." Zil was silent again. Above ground, Kryn dragged scorched fragments of meteorite across the sand, driving them into place with bone-jarring force. Each piece was shaped into an arch, then anchored with ropes of alloy cables stripped from a nearby crash site. His strength was essential, but more than that, he brought a kind of silent steadiness that anchored the group. Virex was less certain. He struggled to manipulate the crude tools Elias had provided. The alien's long, delicate limbs were built for scanning frequencies, not hauling stone. Frustration flared across his face. He slammed a piece of tubing down and hissed, "This is inefficient. Barbaric." Elias's voice came up from the pit, even and sharp. "It's survival. Stop waiting for a better option." Virex crouched, jaw tight. "We are trained scientists. Warriors. Thinkers. This grunt labor is not our purpose." Elias climbed out of the pit and crossed the distance with measured steps. He stopped just shy of Virex, eyes locked on his. "If you think surviving a meteor storm is beneath you, go find another cave. Or, better yet, climb to the tallest dune and meditate. See how that works out." There was a long silence, the kind that rewires a relationship. Virex looked away first, shoulders stiff. Then he returned to his task. The work resumed, faster, more focused. By mid-afternoon, the bunker had doubled in depth and strength. A second level was carved beneath the first, reinforced with strange bluish metal Elias had mined weeks ago from a nearby deposit. Zill examined the support structure, running a scanner across the central beam. The reading fluctuated erratically. This metal, it's not just reactive to temperature. It's pulsing with some kind of energy. "You know what this is?" Elias nodded once. "I don't know its name, but I know it doesn't like being buried too deep." "Then why use it?" "Because it bends instead of breaks." Zill didn't press further, but noted the data carefully in his recording lens. The examination wasn't just physical anymore. Zither had said, "Observe human," but the real lesson was buried under each layer of sand and metal. As the sky began to bleed orange and violet again, a strange quiet fell. No distant impacts. No tremors. Just wind. Elias stepped onto the dune nearest the bunker and stared at the horizon. Then he saw it movement. Figures. 3 of them. He dropped to his stomach and signaled for silence. The others followed instantly, scanning in the direction he pointed. A rival team of students crept across the rocks. He recognized one by the broad stance and blade-like forearms. Zero, a known agitator. Elias's jaw tightened. The teams weren't supposed to interfere with each other, but rules had a funny way of dissolving under pressure. "They're circling us," Elias muttered, "looking for supplies. Maybe sabotage." Zill's skin flickered in alarm. Zither said direct aggression disqualifies them. "And Zither isn't here," Elias replied. "Not physically." Kryn growled low in his throat. "What do? We let them come." Night fell like a guillotine. The stars flickered through a choked sky, and the first tremors began again, small, sharp, insistent. The bunker lights were dimmed to pinpoints. The team waited, poised just beneath the surface, listening. Then came the hiss of footsteps, the scrape of metal, a breath too loud. They struck fast. Zero and his crew dropped smoke pellets into the vent system and tried to seal the entrance shut with debris. Virex nearly passed out before Kryn smashed through the makeshift blockade, roaring with fury. Zill unleashed a flash charge from his skin, temporarily blinding the attackers. Elias tackled one to the ground and disarmed him with a sharp, calculated twist. No one was killed, but the message was clear. They were targets. The rival team retreated, limping into the dark. Inside, the bunker filled with the sound of ragged breathing. Kryn collapsed into a crouch, his chest heaving. Virex coughed violently, then wiped blood from his lower lip. Zill looked at Elias. "You knew they'd come." "I knew desperation makes people reckless," Elias replied. The bunker held, barely, but the storm was only beginning. The final hours of the night passed in staggered silence. Every few minutes, a distant blast would rattle the structure. Shards of rock pelted the outside shell. Once, a meteor struck close enough to send a wave of heat through the vents. But they endured. By dawn, they were alive. The sky was smeared with smoke, and the sun seemed reluctant to rise. Elias emerged first, scanning for threats. Zero's team was gone. The crater where their encampment had been was still smoldering. Zil joined him. They won't try again. No, Elias said quietly. They won't get the chance. Kryn and Virex climbed up slowly. All four stood together, their shadows long against the ash-blown sand. They had survived a second night, not through technology, not through theory, but through grit, instinct, and trust earned in fire. Zil turned to Elias. You're not just a test subject. Elias gave a faint smile. Neither are you. Beneath them, deep in the rock, the strange energy pulsed again. Brighter, slower, as if watching. In the distance, the sky shimmered faintly. Zither was still observing, and the real storm had yet to arrive. By the third day, the desert had become a crucible, testing not just the strength of the body, but the will of the mind. Heat shimmered off the scorched dunes like a veil of liquid glass, and the sun loomed too close, a relentless overseer. The bunker, once a haven, now felt more like a tomb, stifling and claustrophobic beneath the surface. Supplies were dwindling. Sleep was brief and fractured. But the most dangerous threat wasn't physical. It was uncertainty. Elias crouched over a makeshift table, studying a series of etched patterns on the meteor fragments. The symbols were not natural. He was sure of that now. Faint, almost intentional etchings covered the underside of the stone, like circuitry worn down by time. He glanced at Zil, who sat across from him, tuning a frequency scanner. These marks, Elias murmured. You see the symmetry? This isn't just impact residue. Zil leaned forward, his wide black eyes narrowing. It's language, or instruction. The silence that followed was not confusion. It was comprehension. This changed things. If the meteors were more than random destruction, if they were delivering something, the entire premise of the trial shifted. They weren't just surviving nature. They were being studied within a design. Kryn stomped into the bunker, carrying a broken solar collector over one shoulder. His body was smeared with black dust, and his expression was grim. Radiation spiking. The upper dunes are saturated. How long until the next surge? Elias asked without looking up. Hours. Maybe less. The sky is bleeding again. Elias stood slowly, sliding the meteor fragment into a pouch. We reinforced the lower chamber. Virex housed the filtration. Failing. Came the bitter reply from across the chamber. Virex stood in the corner, hunched over a web of tangled wires and fractured tubing. The ionizer's cracked. The replacement is junk. We need something cleaner. We don't have anything cleaner. Elias snapped. Adapt. Virex slammed a piece of tubing down. You don't get it. We're supposed to learn from the test, not die in it. That's exactly what you're doing. Elias shot back. Learning what it takes to survive when every theory you've ever known is useless. You want a solution? Think like a human. Use what's in front of you. The silence that followed was sharp. Then Kryn grunted and handed Virex a blackened power cell. Here, from the crash site. Might hold a few more hours if you rig it right. Virex looked at it, then at Elias. Why do you care if we make it? You're not one of us. I care because I've been where you're going. And no one should walk that alone. Zil's scanner pinged. Everyone froze. The screen displayed a moving energy signature, large, erratic, approaching from the north. Elias stepped closer, watching the display. That's not weather. Kryn's brow furrowed. Another team? Too fast. Elias muttered. Too deliberate. A sound echoed through the air vents, low, resonant, like machinery grinding beneath the earth. Zil looked up. It's here. Within minutes, the ground trembled. Not like before. Not seismic. This was rhythmic, mechanical. Something massive was moving above them. Elias motioned for silence. The team gathered near the access hatch. Through a narrow viewing slit, they saw it. A machine-like figure, towering and skeletal, walking across the sand with inhuman precision. Its core glowed faint blue, and thin appendages extended outward, scanning the ground. Following it were smaller, drone-like constructs, dragging sleds of meteor fragments behind them. Zill's voice was a whisper. They're collecting, not destroying, Elias confirmed. This isn't a storm. It's a harvest. Harvest of what? Elias looked at the meteor fragment in his pouch, then at the machines. Knowledge. They watched as the machine paused, turning its head toward the ground, toward them. For a moment, it stood still. Then it placed a hand on the sand and lowered a small cube into the earth. The light dimmed. The tremors stopped. The machine turned and left, fading into the horizon with its companions. No one spoke for several minutes. Finally, Kryn exhaled. What was that? A probe, Elias said, but not just a scout, a librarian. Virex moved toward the exit, but Elias blocked him. Don't. Not yet. We need to know what it left. We will, but not blind. That night, they reinforced the lowest chamber with a triple-layer wall and positioned the entrance to face away from the cube's placement. Zill set up passive surveillance. Virex calibrated the radiation shield with the salvage power cell. Everyone worked until their hands bled or circuits sparked. No one mentioned sleep. By dawn, the readings from the cube had changed. Zill called the team down. It's broadcasting. Language? Elias asked. Not exactly. It's like a memory. The bunker filled with low tones, vibrations that stirred the air. A projection shimmered faintly from the scanner, showing a solar system not unlike theirs, planets orbiting a bright star. Then devastation, an impact wave consuming them. And afterward, silence. Then motion again, shadows rebuilding, repurposing. They're survivors, Zill whispered. Just like us. Virex stared at the display, pale. Then this, all of this, it's their way of testing who's worth teaching. Elias didn't answer right away. His mind was racing. The storms, the fragments, the machines. The trial wasn't academic. It was recruitment. He turned to the others. They're looking for candidates. Not just to endure, but to understand. And we're close. Kryn looked skeptical. Close to what? An invitation. But the ground didn't agree. The final tremor hit with devastating force. The cube flared and went dark. The bunker screamed under pressure. Beams groaned. Sand poured in from above. They scrambled, reinforcing the entry and sealing the lower door. We have minutes, Elias shouted. Virex lunged for the ionizer. Zill clutched the cube, despite its fading glow. Kryn braced the main support beam with his body. As the ceiling gave way, Elias triggered the failsafe, detonating a directional blast upward, releasing the pressure wave. The bunker held, barely. Smoke and sand filled the air. When it cleared, they were alive, but buried. Darkness swallowed them. Breath shallow. Silence. And then, the cube pulsed once more. Steady. Alive. And a new shape appeared in the dust. An opening, not from their doing. A tunnel. Smooth. Carved with purpose. Leading somewhere deeper. Elias looked at the others. This isn't over. It's just change. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Together, they stepped forward into the dark. The tunnel was unlike anything they had encountered. It pulsed with a soft bioluminescent glow that throbbed in time with some deep, unseen rhythm. The walls were smooth, not hewn by tools but shaped, grown even, with the gentle curvature of bone or coral. The air was cooler, dry, and carried a faint scent of ozone and metal. For a long time, none of them spoke. Each step forward was taken not with caution, but reverence. Elias moved first, the others falling in behind without hesitation. Whatever lay ahead, it was not chance that had revealed this path. It was invitation. The cube's final pulse had not been death. It had been a beacon. Kryn's shoulders tensed with each echo that bounced back through the corridor. He could feel the weight of the world above them. The collapse that had nearly ended them, now suspended in some unnatural stasis. This shouldn't be here, he muttered. This place wasn't on any scan. It wasn't meant to be found by machines, Zill replied softly, his eyes catching the shimmer of the tunnel's glow. Only by those who proved worthy. Virex walked silently, his long fingers brushing the wall now and then, as if trying to read its texture like braille. For the first time, he looked less irritated by Earth's crude unpredictability and more humbled by it. They descended for what felt like hours. The path twisted, branched, and looped back, always downward, always deeper. Finally, the tunnel widened, opening into a cavern unlike anything on Earth. A chamber the size of a cathedral stretched before them, lined with towering obelisks that hummed with power. In the center floated a massive sphere, suspended midair, covered in similar etchings as the meteor fragments. It pulsed once, low, resonant, and then began to unfold. Panels slid apart with liquid smoothness. From within, a figure emerged, not quite humanoid, not quite machine. It hovered just above the ground, its form shifting between solidity and energy. Its eyes, if they could be called that, burned a soft silver. None of them spoke. The figure didn't require language. It projected thought, not words. Pure and clear, "You have survived." The statement was neither congratulatory nor cold. It was fact. Elias stepped forward. His voice didn't tremble. "We endured. We adapted. You learned." That was the test. Zil tilted his head. A test for what? The figure's shape shifted slightly, as if considering them anew. For partnership. The meteor storms were not accidents. They were calibrations. The fragments contained remnants of a lost civilization. Ours. We sent them not to destroy, but to identify minds capable of understanding. Virex took a step forward, eyes wide. "You seeded trials across galaxies, worlds, looking for survivors." "No, for successors." The chamber darkened slightly, and new images began to appear in the air. Holographic memories of civilizations long gone, their knowledge encoded in the stone, their fates sealed by catastrophe or stagnation. Some fell to war, others to entropy. But in each case, survivors had been chosen, taught, transformed. Zil watched the memories flicker past. Why us? Because humans still possess instinct and limitation, and through these, innovation, combined with the capacity to suffer and still persist. Elias clenched his jaw. Then why the deception? Why the death? The being's voice grew heavier, not colder, but older, wiser. Because knowledge given without cost is discarded. Only that which is earned reshapes destiny. A pause stretched. Then the sphere rotated again, revealing several thin, spiraling branches that extended outward, forming into what resembled a control panel or interface. This archive is not just memory. It is design, technology, philosophy, energy. But it cannot be used without sacrifice. Each of you must choose. Kryn raised his head. Choose what? To return with this knowledge and share it, knowing your world may resist, or to remain and continue the path alone, evolving beyond your origin. Zil's chest tightened. You mean leave Earth? Leave being human. The chamber fell silent. Elias turned, looking at the faces of the team. Kryn, whose strength had held them together through fire and force. Zil, whose curiosity had bridged understanding. Virex, who had learned to respect the unknown. Each of them stood at a precipice that no syllabus or training had prepared them for. What if we refuse both? Elias asked, what if we just go back? Then the archive will close, and your world will end not by fire but by stagnation. The storm you survived was a warning. The next will be the reckoning. There it was, the central truth. This had never been just a test of endurance. It was an offering, but also a demand. Zil stepped forward and placed his hand on the interface. The panel glowed beneath his fingers. I choose to carry the knowledge, not to dominate, but to prepare. Kryn nodded, following suit. If survival was a lesson, then sharing is the proof we learned it. Virex hesitated. Then slowly he stepped forward. I thought humans were primitive. Now I see you're still becoming. Finally, Elias approached. He placed his hand last. The interface flared with light, and the room was filled with cascading pulses of sound and data. More than information. Understanding. The kind that changes the shape of thought itself. The figure began to fade. Then you are ready. Return. Carry fire, not as a weapon, but as a beacon. A new path opened in the chamber wall, a corridor spiraling upward toward the surface, bathed in white light. The four of them turned, walking together, changed but not broken. When they emerged, the desert was silent, the sky above them clear. The storms had ended, not because the danger was gone, but because the choice had been made. In the distance, they saw the wreckage of other teams, other survivors who had failed or fallen. But they also saw signs of motion, new paths opening, other bunkers stirring. Elias looked toward the horizon. The test was over. The work was just beginning.